Hello, Poland. I feel like I should be at Eurovision. That's about the longest catwalk I've ever taken. Super excited to be here. Notice I'm the second Australian you have to listen to today. So just really quick, I actually have no idea what he said about me then, but I'll give you a bit of a quick introduction. So I'm still a professor at University of Adelaide, but I have a side hustle. So I have a small research business, there's 10 of us, and half of us are research PhDs, and half of us are computer scientists, also computer vision, so software engineers, augmented reality geniuses. That's the much younger half. So yeah, we deal with some great companies, which is fantastic. So the reason why I built a side hustle outside of the university system is because I became really, I guess, engaged and interested in the concept of technology, using it in research design. So I'm going to talk to you about a really, really large, long-range study we've done in Australia. We have actually replicated this system in many, many countries, but the results today are specifically around a study we did in Australia, commissioned by ThinkTV. Now, ThinkTV are a bit like ThinkBox or EGDA or ScreenForce, so they're an association of networks. And they came to me about 2 years ago and said, the pendulum has swung. You know, the digital competitors essentially are taking the lion's share of advertising dollars. Can you help us, Karen, kind of reinstate the magic of television? And I said, look, we can have a look at what TV does best, but we have to do it my way. So we're going to make sure that we're fair to all the competitors. So my point is, it's independent, we're fair to the competitors, it's highly rigorous, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So the findings we talk about today, even though it's funded by a television association, they're real. Because at the end of the day, that's our whole proposition. Our brand proposition is academic rigor. So let me start with this. Brand Growth 101, and it's really simple. If advertising doesn't cut through and get remembered, it's never going to have, you know, any opportunity to nudge propensity at the buying occasion, right? I mean, you've heard that probably today a few times. So we said to ThinkTV, let's go back to the basics. These are the attributes, so cut through, advertising cut through, and advertising memorability are two key components of great advertising. So let's have a look and see which media platforms foster these really, really vital attributes. I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology in a minute, but for the sake of starting, so I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey. We're moving towards, so rather than research being like the old days where you know, you ask a small group of people and they fill in a survey and you go off and do the analysis, we're all about research design that enables scale, that enables passive collection of data, because at the end of the day, what you say and what you do is very different. What you do and what you think you are doing is very different. So we made a call to build an attention collection tool through a gaze tracking facility. I'll explain to that in a minute. And it's not typical because it's app-based, which means we've done it in 4 countries, 70,000 test ads, multiple devices, multiple platforms. So attention is our cut-through impact measure. And in terms of measuring memorability, rather than saying to a survey group, how much did you remember, you know, even recall, which is largely flawed, we sent people to a virtual store and asked them to pick from essentially a shelf with all different brands on it. So let me finish at that, and I'll talk about the technology, which will make a little bit more sense with those things. Okay, so at its very basic, we built an app. When all else fails, build an app. But the app is a shell, and what sits behind the code in the app is a couple of things. So stepping right back, if you were in our panel group, say you're in the UK or the US or wherever, in this case it's Australia, you would download the app onto the device that we are measuring. The app then enables the camera, and the camera starts rolling when sponsored ads or ads in feed come on the screen. The other thing it does is it tags advertising, right? So we can tell how long ads are on screen, we can tell how big they are, how many pixels they are, etc. Hold that thought. So again, this study is about being fair to everyone. So one thing when we were trying to understand cross-platform effectiveness, we wanted to start with ads that were off the YouTube platform, rather than just, grabbing a whole bunch of TV ads and then putting them into Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, whoever we're working with. So essentially what we did is our first groups, we had 1,000 people who, now bearing in mind this is 2 years, this is the first part of it, so this is on PC. We have done mobile since, but we asked 1,000 people to go to their PC, download our app, the camera is turned on, they start hovering around and using YouTube as per normal. In the meantime, our app is pulling creative out of the platform. So we're putting different ads into a creative bucket, and we collect lots and lots and lots of different ads. Then what we did is the next group of people, a separate group of people, we asked them to download the app. The app starts rolling with the camera. We then send them to their Facebook feed, and they log on as per normal, bearing in mind we don't collect any personal information. And the app becomes redundant immediately after they've done this study, so there's no privacy issues. So they're on the PC, they're doing their Facebook thing, but, and I think Leslie mentioned this before, creative plays a big, big role in how impactful essentially a campaign will be. So we needed to control for creative cross-platform, right? So what we did is we built some ad blocking code into the back of our app. So what it meant was if you were on Facebook, we would pull out the ads you were supposed to see and we would replace them. So we intercepted ad load. So now we've got people that have been on YouTube and seen a bunch of ads. We've then got people that have been on Facebook and seen the same ads, and we did the same for television. So given television is, most people don't have cameras or smart TVs, we did that one a little bit differently, where they would download our app on a separate device, and we had it sitting in front of the television, and it was streaming programming content to the TV screen while the camera was running from the second device. And so we worked with the networks, and the same ads went into a choice of, say, 8 different programs. So you could choose which program you wanted, and off you go. So now we've got 3 groups of viewing, and they've all seen the same creative. Then what happens is we send them to our virtual store. So shortly after they've done their view, they then go into a sort of a mock store. Admittedly, it's not real sales, but we had to control for so many things. So we needed to make sure that we got a view and a sale from an individual, but we also, as I said, controlled for creative and a number of other things that we did as well. So now we've got views from different platforms and a sale, and all the data was then transferred back to our stack. And bearing in mind, we've been tracking the ads, so we can tell how long people have been on the screen, if they've scrolled, if they've switched out, if they've... we've now got sound on and sound off. Plus, we've got footage, which we then transposed into an attention score. So we built our own gaze models, rather than using any SDKs off the shelf. And what we did is essentially our gaze model, because we had a reference point on the screen, we could actually work out whether someone was looking at the screen and looking at the ad, looking at the screen and not looking at the ad, or not looking at all. So all of that data went back to the stack, and it pumped out some pretty interesting information. And again, it's not in labs, so anyone could do this study on the bus, at home, in the bathroom, with family, with no family, in a completely natural way. No headgear, you know, really, really passive collected research. And I think this is the future of where we're all headed. So let's start with which platform commands the greatest attention. So I'm going to get to the why in a minute, but let's just start with some of the early stats. So bearing in mind this is still PC versus TV on TV screen. Basically, in a nutshell, it says that TV gets twice the active viewing of YouTube and 15 times that of Facebook. So in an average second, what I love about this slide is we're not trying to tell you that all ads are watched 100% of the time, because they're not. No one really loves advertising, let's be honest. But some platforms do better at attention grabbing than others. And this is the point of this study. So in an average second, television grabs more attention. But I wanted to pay attention, excuse the pun, to this point about passive viewing. So the passive viewing on Facebook's really high. Now, passive viewing is when you're looking at the screen, but you're not looking at the ad. So why I wanted to make reference to that is the more that we've done with attention, the more we realise that you can actually get an impact. Like, ads do have an impact, even if you're not directly looking at it, if it's just nearby. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But the good news is we found that attention and product choice, which are our two impact measures, are related. And the more we do, the more we understand. The point on this slide suggests that significant sameness is what we were looking for. So that's this whole concept of, you know, that's 8 different studies at this point. Rather than looking for statistical difference in any one set of data, we want to look for the same patterns across data, and then you know you're onto something. If you're changing the conditions, but the patterns look the same, then you know you're onto something. So, given I just told you that attention and product choice are related, you probably know what I'm going to say next. But before I did it, that's kind of our example. So it's kind of a cute vending experience. It's not like an ugly survey where, you know, it's very clunky. So we try and make it as best realistic as we can. The reason for this, I need to explain. So choice is one thing. Making a choice is one thing, but it doesn't account for market share. So let me explain. So if you had a shelf full of soft drinks, cola soft drinks, there would be more of you that would choose Coke than Dr. Pepper by the nature of the size of the brand, right? So if a researcher doesn't control for that, which is rife, so lots of recall studies and lots of general research will say, look, this brand does better, or this recall is higher, but it's probably more around the penetration of the brand versus than it is any real impact from the creative or the campaign or whatever it is you're looking at. So it's important for us to tell you that we did what we call short-term advertising strength. So it's a calculation that shows a baseline where people were not exposed and did buy, and also those that were exposed and did buy. So what you need to look at is anything over 100 means there's an impact, and it's proportional. So given I just told you that the two measures were related, it's probably no surprises that TV by far wins in terms of its sales impact. And the asterisk refers to this passive viewing. So we could start to see, because theoretically Facebook gets the least amount of attention, but it got a few more sales than we'd expect. So that's when we first started to understand that, you know, there was something more in passive. And then Facebook said to us, well, hang on a sec, we're about to optimize for mobile. So the study that you've done means nothing, right? Because you've done it on PC and you've done it on television. So if you were to do it again, Facebook would win. So we thought, all right, well, we'll do it again. So we rebuilt our app on an iOS platform, and we got some new viewers to do the same thing. They downloaded their app on the phone, the camera went on, they went to Facebook, they went to YouTube. But the other thing we did do is we sent them to like a catch-up. So to be fair to television, we wanted to understand whether TV on mobile had an impact as well. Then we sent them to the store, and we then got all the data back. We also had to optimize our software in that that was kind of at the time when orientation, so people were watching supposedly ads in horizontal view versus vertical view, so we had to adjust our models. And here's some of the results. So this is the first study showing the stats for each of the platforms. So Facebook were right, and they were wrong. Absolutely, by far, mobile devices do actually generate more sales, but it does for television as well. So the device itself, because it's more lean in, and this is evident in the attention scores, so even attention on mobile for television is greater than a television screen. So we can see without a doubt that mobile screens where you're leaning in do actually generate more impact, but it does for all platforms and relative to the same order that we found the original study. But for me as a researcher, it's less about who wins and more about the why. So we wanted to understand why is it that they consistently, or why does consistently television work better and the others don't? So we started to look around at some of the other things that we'd captured. And one of the things that we did capture was this concept called coverage. Now, coverage, in my opinion, is an artifact of clutter. So that basically means the size of the screen that the ad covers, not how much of the ad's on screen, but the size of the screen that the ad covers. Going back to my earlier research days, knowing that lots of clutter around the ad is likely to have a negative impact on any measure that you use. So we had this data, so we wanted to understand the relationship. So is coverage an artifact that is an artifact of clutter? Does it impact attention? Firstly, what we can see without a doubt is that coverage varies a lot. So on mobile it's better, and that's because they move they cut the feed out from the outside. I think the next slide shows you that. Makes complete sense. But essentially, the point of that is that coverage on mobile, on the online platforms, the online competitors, was significantly lower in each case than television. Television's always 100% screen coverage on every device. And the other thing is we saw that there was a relationship between the variables. So we could see that coverage did have an impact on attention and sales. So we went, oh, sorry, I saw you were taking a photo. That was too quick. So we went, all right, well, if coverage plays such a role, which is essentially a visibility element, right? What about the viewability standard that the MRC mandated in 2014? So you would all know the Media Ratings Council out of the US mandated that an advertiser doesn't have to pay for a view until it's 50% pixels and 2 seconds of time. So that's amazing. I mean, they've gone really smack in the middle because they've got pressure from the brand owners and they've got pressure from the media owners. So for a happy medium, they said, all right, well, if 50% and 2 seconds of time. But we were always skeptical of that. How is it that you should pay for an impression if it only gets to half the size? We were always a bit skeptical. So we went, well, we've got data on this. We've got coverage, but we've also got pixels. So because we tracked scrolling and time, we could tell whether pixels actually did have a negative relationship or a positive relationship with sales and attention. Firstly, again, pixels vary a lot, and without a doubt, television always has 100% pixels, 100% of the time. But this is the killer slide. So the first thing is, what we did find was that, and I don't think you need a PhD for this, if you don't see an ad, it won't have an impact. If you at least see it 50% on screen, it's going to have some impact. So there's good news. But the bad news for the online groups is that what happens next. So there's a material uplift the bigger the ad is on the screen. And I kind of think that's really a no-brainer moment. So the more you see it, the more likely it is to have an impact. That makes complete sense. And this is the mobile group. So the numbers are different, but the patterns are the same. So we kind of say anything less than 100% pixels is, you know, in my opinion, is bad for brands or bad for advertisers. And we can also see that even if it's 100% pixels, once it's 100% coverage as well, so there's this whole concept of viewability as a total that, you know, and I think that media owners should be held account to this. So we've said for a long time that there's a performance upside beyond the current standard, and we push brand owners to lobby. But guess what? On Monday night, from New York, they've just put out, so the MRC, you have to go and check this out. So the MRC have just put out a press release. In 2 years' time, they are going to change the standard. Can you believe that? So it's going to be 100% pixels and 2 seconds of time. Isn't that great for brand owners? So my presentation will be null and void shortly because they are actually going to change it. So the big question we get is, that's great, that's short, that's, you know, a moment in time. So STAS is by default short-term advertising strength. And if you know anything about the Les Binet-Peterfield work, you'd know that, you know, there's this advocacy for long-term brand engagement. So some of the questions were, you know, short-term's one thing, but what happens to advertising decay? Thinking about which platform essentially holds the advertising in memory for longer. So we did another study. Like I said, bear in mind this is 5,000 people and about 60,000 test ads all up. So it's not the smallest study I've ever done. We went back to a new group of people. We asked them to view, again, on all the different groups. And we sent them to the virtual store again, day one. Next time, we did the same people, but we didn't show them the ad again. We asked them to go back to the virtual store and make another choice. And then on day 28, we did the same thing. They went back to the virtual store and made a choice. So what we wanted to understand was whether there was a decay in purchasing. So there you have it. Without a doubt, as Les Binet and Peterfield rightly suggest, television by far keeps advertising in memory for longer, by far. Can't read my own slides. Facebook decays 2.5 times greater and YouTube decays, so they're both roughly around 2.5 to 3 times. But what's more interesting to me is the green circles. So TV, even at 28 days, has a higher STAS level than the other two on day one. So that goes to show the difference in the impact. So TV decays slower, and it's also got a higher STAS from day one. So here's some really cool points, and I'm sure they're going to give you these slides. But essentially it means that television takes 9 times longer to decay to 0 than its competitors. Isn't that unbelievable? Let's do the TV screen. So the last lot was mobile, but this is TV on TV screen. Now, although TV on TV screen didn't get the highest, by comparison to TV on mobile, didn't get higher STAS or attention, for some reason there's some magic in that TV screen. 109 days to have no impact. Unbelievable. So if anyone ever questions the value of television, you have to pull these slides up. And again, this is all consistent with what we've seen in Ubiquity. We've seen, you know, our numbers, the Les Binet numbers, the Ubiquity numbers, they're almost identical. So we quite often refer to each other's work. So we've done it in different ways with different methodologies, but the result keeps coming back. I'm rushing a bit through. So then we get the question about what happens in a multi-platform buy. So eventually the competitors came in and said, we concede, we get that TV is valuable, but we're a really great friend to television and we're a really great partner. If you were to split your ad dollars, you should give us, they'd say more than half. But what happens with synergy? Now, synergy typically means 1 + 1 = 3, so there's some sort of magical mix between them. So we decided to do, and you know, everyone will do studies differently, but we went back into field with a different group of people, and we asked them to, we set them back up and streamed the programming to the TV screen, and we asked them during that day to either then go onto their second device, which mobile, and either go onto Facebook or go onto YouTube. Now, bearing in mind, again, it's the same ads all the way through the 2 years, so that they've seen the ads on television, then we've intercepted ad load in their natural feed on all of those platforms, and we then send them to the store for the dual impact. And here's the results. So this is what we expected. So essentially our philosophy is that if you've got 100% of budget, you're not going to, if you're going to do a second platform, you're not going to increase that budget. So we sort of halved it and said we would expect the stats to be around those numbers, given you would put half the impressions here or half the money there. And this is what we found. That actually the best combination for the highest stats is 2 TV assets. And that makes complete sense to us because, you know, in terms of the visibility and the magic, there is still stuff we can't explain. So visibility explains attention and stats to a degree, but there's still some more magic that we haven't really understood, and I think that's, to be honest, around programming. But the point is here that the combination of TV plus catch-up or BVOD or whatever you want to call it is actually the best combination. And when you look at the numbers, so for example, Facebook did what we expected, but it's less than 1 impression on television. So I'm not sure that really synergy is all that it's cracked up to be. So we kind of talk about poor performing platforms essentially drag down the expected. And we believe that's a lot to do with the fact that you can't see ads on these platforms because they work hard against you. So I guess for me, my outtake here is think about every single reach point. Think about its audience quality. We didn't talk a lot about that today, but I know some of the other speakers have. Think about its ability to be seen. So that's all about pixels, time, and coverage. And think about which platforms are going to render the greatest value over time. So that's why we kind of talk about, that's why not all reach is equal. Thank you.